let's start with the cast. They are so joyous uh, and out of control, and yet totally in sync with each other. How did you how did you first come to meet that cast of characters and performers?
They are a wonderful group. They were a wonderful group. And I think, as a matter of fact, that they're the reason that the film has had such a long life. It's because of the characters, uh, and it's not because of the gentrification, which is the theme behind, but it's the characters. And before doing this film, I was doing theater, and in Portland, and there are several of the members of the cast who were in the theater troupe, Corky and Lola in particular. And so they were people I already knew, and other ones were people that I knew for other reasons, or that I had seen perform. For instance, Christopher Hershey performed a lot in Portland, and I'd already seen him. And Richard Tyler was a neighbor, and he's the one who did all the music. And so they came to me one by one. Walt Curtis actually was extremely important, and he was not in the theater group, but he was obviously the star.
Is there a star? I mean, I kept going back and forth. He felt like the star, but then Lola feels like the star, and then Corky. I mean, it's such an ensemble cast, and then the individuals sort of rise at different times while making room for others. How did you how did you sort of plan or negotiate or work with this ensemble cast while also making room for some of those standout performances?
Well, it was really important to me to um, have something on each of the characters, and so that is what we have here, And so you get to know them, and as a result, I think people sort of feel like they know these people, and that it's a group that they could be part of easily. Um, but I don't know exactly how to answer that. I mean, it's just a question of directing and a question of creating an ensemble.
This was your first feature film. What and you came from theater, uh, teaching and studying theater previous to this. How did you decide to transition into feature filmmaking and such an independent feature film?
It was because of Eric Edwards, who is right over here. Why don't you stand up, Eric? Eric, Eric, Eric and I were neighbors actually, and we worked together in public access cable channel that it was really an original thing, and it was one of the first public access channels that existed. And for a year before we made this movie, we were working together on a weekly basis. We would do a show, and sometimes the show was simply filming a land use planning group or something like that. But then gradually we began doing little pieces that were more like short movies. And as a matter of fact, the last thing that we did, the DDA Connection, really was a short. And Eric was frustrated because after coming out of film school, and then to be doing something with such crummy material, because it was 1 inch tape, and reel to reel tape, and the quality was really low, and so he was eager to do something more, and the situation presented itself because I had lived through the experience in the neighborhood. But it was, of course, what I'd lived through was that lasted maybe for 4 or 5 years, and this movie, of course, is only 90 minutes long. So obviously, it's not quite the same story, and it's compressed. But I also had these actors, and then I had Eric, as as who was more than just a cameraman. He was actually maybe essential to making this movie. Thanks, Eric.
What and what would tell us a little bit about the background of the setting of the story. So how much does the story relate or reflect to real life things happening in the community with the banks buying
Well,
up neighborhoods?
as I said, the real events lasted for several years, and so they were. So I remembered the things that were important, and that's what got into the script. It's what got into the film. Um, I think that it reflects actually though what was going on in the neighborhood, what was going on in neighborhoods like that all over the United States. I don't think that Portland was original or unique in that regard. Um, is that what you mean? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because of course today we hear so much about gentrification and about neighborhoods changing or being changed in these ways where the longtime community members are getting moved out, and a whole different group of folks, usually with more money, are getting moved in. Of course, this film shows us that this is, not something new, for us in the present, but there's this legacy in American cities of that happening. So,
Right, and at the time there was no word like gentrification. It was really the beginning of that, and it was. I mean, we'd seen a few things of that nature in Portland, where neighborhoods were demolished in order to build high rises, but we never really. I think we never really thought that it would happen where we lived because we thought our neighborhood was paradise. So I think that it really was early in terms of noticing and making something about gentrification.
something that really stands out to me in this film, and I've seen it maybe one or two times previously, is this transition between the 60s into the 70s. And there's that scene in the bedroom with Marjorie and Lola and Michael, and the women seem to be reminiscing about the good old days of the 60s maybe, and then the 70s are the film's reality of this shifting around money and property, obviously. What am I off in that, or how is this film set in the 70s sort of reflecting on the changing times of the previous decade?
Well, actually, I think Portland was slow in that regard because the '60s lasted into the '70s in Portland. But what it does represent is the feeling in that group and the feeling in reality at that time that this was the end of something and that we were going in a different direction after that. I mean, I think that that's the way the movie ends, and I think that's what was happening. And as a matter of fact, this was 1977 when it was shot, but Ronald Reagan was arrested. He was elected in 1980, and that really was the end of that kind of life. Everything changed then, and so I think that this movie kind of foretells that.
I'd love to hear about the how you and Eric plotted the the cinematography, the set design of the film. It has such a natural feel to it, and and maybe I think we have a microphone.
I was going to say, would you like to answer this
And
one, Eric?
Eric, if you don't mind, maybe jumping in here and just waiting for the microphone to come down. Thank you for being here. What a treat. And we also have the sound recordist in the audience too.
Can you do a microphone without a mask?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, we were watching a lot of French films, especially Truffaut, and that was French New Wave. At least, that was top. That was what paying a lot of attention to. So the handheld thing was important.
Is that loud enough?
Oh,
I think you could talk louder. Yeah, hold it a little closer.
can you hear this?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's directing from the stage.
Let's see. What about the style of the film, or this?
Yeah, just how how did you function? I mean, tell us about the set. It seemed like that was a real house, and what kind of camera equipment what kind of camera did you use?
It was all location, so it was all. It was really just you get in a room. I mean, that room when they first start the meeting in Helen's kitchen, that is how many people are in that room, and that room's like a 12 by 12 room. You just do it the most efficient way you can. You stage it, and you. I mean, really, for me, it was just a matter of having a camera and following the drama, just following the moments and the emotion of it, and trying to just be on the right people at the right time. There was a lot of just like get here at this line, get here at that line, and then a lot of choreography was just dealing with the physicality of people coming in the room. So it was a dance, and it was, when I got out of college, I mean, I can still do it, but it was like when you get out of college and you really want to embrace handheld, because when Gus and I were in college, we had a couple of notable students there that were really good with handheld camera, and we sort of watched that kind of coverage of things. And so it was really just, I mean, it was pretty much by the skin of our, I mean, it was just, you're making it up. But, you get there and you sort it out, and you see the scene and how it works out, and then you go that way,
I think it was important that we had worked together for a year before that.
Yeah.
I think that we had some sort of a sensitivity to each other.
Oh yeah, and then shooting in a documentary style where you're really when you're doing documentary, because when we were doing the small, like the DDA films, it was really just taking that camera out and going in situ and just following and tracking, and I mean, I always had a pretty good instinct for when you move, when you leave the subject, and when I always look at keep my left eye open, because my right eye's on the viewfinder, so you're always trying to anticipate, okay, they're gonna, you sense that they're gonna speak, and and it's a game of poker. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but well, you try and stay agile, I wanted to ask something about the costume, because what struck me is who did their own costume, how? Like when Jack comes down in the cab, gets out and confronts Lola as she's pedaling, he's got a suit on. Now, that guy did he have a suit?
Three-piece suit. And he looks fantastic.
And then Butch had those great polka dot and red things on. I mean, this was good. Did you just have people bring us a few sets of clothes, or how did that work?
Yes, that's exactly the way it was. And well, I pretty much told people what I wanted. I wanted largely I wanted red and blue. So that's what people wore. But they would show me. They would bring a whole bunch of things, and I would say, yes, that one, like that.
I never knew that. That's the color palette. You were on top of that.
Yes.
I didn't need to know it. It's just interesting.
Right. Well, did you ever wonder why they were all wearing red and blue? And the only person who ever wore something that wasn't that color was Marjorie when she wore green. She wore a green vintage dress once, but I said that was okay.
But her hair was red-ish.
Right. Yeah.
What about the script? I mean, it feels so natural, improvised. You had a script. How
I
did
had
you?
what I had was a was something describing all of the scenes of what was going to happen, and then I often would work with, or I always would work with the actors before we shot a scene, and so we worked out what was going to happen, and some of the characters were very good at coming up with lines. Corky, for instance, but everyone actually had ideas, and I would say, yes, that's good, keep that in, or no, don't keep that, don't say that sort of thing. But it was based on something that was like 12 pages long, and so that's what it was. But it is not an improvised piece. It is not an improvised film. It has improvised moments, but it has a very strong structure.
Any questions? Any other questions?
Oh, surely somebody must have a question.
Yes, here. Please wait for the microphone.
Just curious about your translation from thinking theatrically to thinking cinematically. Whether you could say something about the difference between working in theater and working in film.
Well, um, the the kind of theater that I did was involved very natural behavior, and it was not classical kind of theater at all. And so that is the kind of acting or behaving that is in the film. It is very natural, and so I didn't really have any difficulty passing from one to the other, not at all. But I had also been in theater for a long time, and since I was in high school, so I had a fair amount of experience working with people and seeing how things were going to go, and also seeing who didn't work out. So I had to say that you couldn't be in here, you couldn't be in this movie because it's not working out. So, but does that answer it at all?
Yeah, and I mean even that. So it's the performance style and that collaboration, and also just like whether story functions differently or the sort of rhythm of scenes and stuff like that. Whether that felt different, but it sounds like it was just a natural shift.
Well, it's a yes. Oh, this movie is it does move rapidly. It is a fast kind of movie, and that is the urban aspect of it, I think, and the fact that frequently there are scenes where people are talking all at once or talking over each other, and in those scenes, then it probably was more improvised. When they're speaking all at once, that sort of thing.
I loved it. Thank you.
A question right up here on top, and the mic is right by you.
Wanted to say that it was beautiful. The
Where is this
The
person?
movie.
Where are you?
I'm here.
Way up at the top.
Okay.
I really enjoy that the casting of different type of people and ethnicities that make that movie very ahead of the times. The movie that you did was like ahead of the times. It made it in 1977, very, very actual as we are in the situation that we are in inflation, that the petroleum era of the 1970s provoked the inflation of the housing market. The housing market in the 1970s was exactly as a consequence of the politics of the president of the 1973. I only recall the words of Nixon and the for those presidents. So we had inflation based from petroleum, which we have it again from petroleum again. I don't know if you got my message. It was great, ahead of their time.
She's saying she enjoyed the film, but
Thank you.
But
The history repeat itself. That's what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say.
exactly.
We're doing the same situation right now.
she's just thank you. It's such a good comment that this film is almost a mirror to today, although missing, the sort of the freedoms of the 70s. I mean, the sort of lifestyle, personality freedoms of the 70s, but just inflation and affordable housing and government, the politics of
Well,
that.
that's the theme behind everything, and I felt right from the beginning that it was important to have, funny things and to have crazy characters, very colorful characters, and not make a. I had no interest in making a film about gentrification in a boring way. I think that is, and the fact that was the way it turned out is the reason why the film is doing well all over. So, I don't know if that's enough.
Other questions? Again, up top, and then we'll come down here. If you can just wait for, the mic. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that film. The film was gorgeous, and I was just wondering about the production design. The scenes and rooms were absolutely stunning, and each felt like they were their own characters. And I was just wondering, like, what went into the production design and the process behind it.
What is behind what production design?
The
Is that what you
production
said?
design,
Well, it is my taste. It was in my taste, so definitely I created that aspect of it. A person, and also it is expressed by the locations. The scene, the opening scene where Walt is in that little kitchen, and it is somebody else's kitchen, and we didn't change it. It's exactly the same as the person who lived there. We just came in and Walt took hold of the scene of the location, and the house, the main house where things happen, where Lola and Jack live, also belonged to someone else, and it is what that person had created. But I chose that location because that is what I wanted it to look like, and because it was beautiful and because it was so interesting. But I'm very lucky in the sense that I found that person and I found that house. And also the artist Hank Pander did a few things, in terms of the decor, but not throughout, just occasionally. So there really wasn't like a production designer. As a matter of fact, it's important to say that this movie had no crew to speak of. It had Gus doing sound, and Eric and myself. That's it. And people say, well, how did you get a crew to do that? Well, there was no crew, which is one of the reasons why the movie took a long time to make, because it took a whole summer, 3 whole months, and that's because when you don't have a crew, you have to do everything yourself. But I'm glad that we didn't have any. I'm glad that no one got in the way.
yeah. There was a question down here, and if you can just wait for the microphone, thank you. I was hoping you were going to say that was your house.
No, it wasn't my house. It wasn't my
It was
house.
a beautiful house.
So I guess my question is a little bit of a follow-up to that gentleman's question about transitioning from theater to, film with a, and I guess all the scenes shot in the house were great, and it was also really beautiful to see the city and all the on location shooting. I think even the scene where they're going to the realty sign, and the scene of the cliff jumping, and the scene, there's one scene where they're at some sort of outdoor patio, and the camera pans up and then it transitions to the moon. It was all very beautiful. And so I'm just wondering if you did the public access work that you did have a lot of on location shooting, and did you find it very freeing to kind of film out on the streets and kind of be able to show that side of the community?
Well, you have to shoot things somewhere, and we found the place to shoot them and it was complicated. I mean, for instance, when Lola is waiting on this you called it peddling. She peddling on the street, peddling herself on the street, and then the customer comes walking into a pool of light. That was connected to my brother's office on the third floor of that building, and so that was where the electricity came from. And and Eric set up the lights so that it was just on Lola and on that guy, or on Jack. It's a question of using your imagination mostly, and of knowing a place so well as I did and as he did, that we could always come up with a solution and come up with a place and come up with a way to do it.
Thank you.
I mean, I think the question that comes up in the audience is that connection of theater, and then doing documentaries. Like when we were doing documentaries, make you agile because it's uncontrolled. So directing, shooting, uncontrolled action is really a dance. You're on your feet, and it's about your wits. But as I watch the film now, after all these years, I'm amazed in some scenes where we really just didn't get any coverage. And I mean, that was most of the time I was solving it by following it. But sometimes there's a couple of moments where it's like, geez, you didn't get a shot that way or whatever. But I think the thing that's interesting about this film is that it's a combination of theater, in that those scenes, improv or not, they were played out as theater. And I think that with Penny and with the actors, a lot of the timing of those scenes kind of work as entire scenes, especially the ensemble pieces around the table. And the instincts of those actors was that the timing works itself out. And then you do so many cuts, you cover it in so many ways, you feel like you have it. But it is a combination of theater, in that you come from theater, and the way those scenes were set up and worked out, they worked as scenes. And so in terms of editing, the editing was, we were down to very few elements in editing because of the limited coverage. But we always, we'd always change an angle and cover it from another, just do it again, but change the angle. That always gave you a cut point. But the film is worked out pretty well in terms of theater, in terms of dramatic beginning, middle, and ends of scenes that do work, and they do work amongst the actors. So I think that might be the question about theater, and then theater, improv, theater, just winging it, whatever. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I could say one other thing. I guess there's still somebody who wants to ask a question, but I just can say one other thing about what my background was before that time, and that was that I was I was very much interested in Bertolt Brecht and in Brechtian theater, and it's definitely the influence of property. I can see it. I don't, and plenty of other people, especially Europeans, because this is now played a lot of places in Europe, have said, they have said, are you a Brechtian? You know, without me ever having to say it. And what that is about is a kind of distancing that occurs at different places in the movie, with Brecht, it was a stopping the emotions, stopping the narrative, and the person suddenly addresses the theater, and that was the distancing, and as to bring home what it is that is behind this scene that you're seeing. And mine in the movie, we didn't ever really do that, where the person looked at the camera and explained it. But there's so many scenes in Property which interrupt the narration but explain what something important in relation to the theme. For instance, when Karen is sweeping the floor and then begins to dance with that, and especially in that particular setting, which was an actual house that was in the block, so that you see the architecture, you see the bones of this room and of this house. So it explains so many things without ever actually putting it into the narrative. It's an explanation outside of the narrative, but so essential.
Well, there's also Walt just talking to himself, either in the kitchen or in his car, which is a kind of a device. How many people, how often does a filmmaker rely on somebody to talk to themselves in their car to explain, to get on with the
That the comment is that Walt talks to himself in several instances, either in his kitchen or driving in the car, and that helps also explain a plot point or a story point. But that it's unconventional, to have a character be talking to himself but then helping the audience along.
But there are other examples of that kind of distancing in the movie, and I think that they reveal the fact that I was interested in Brecht theater.
Time for another question.
This
Up
one
here.
Was this the person that was going to ask before?
Okay, well, first we'll go up here and then we'll come down to the front row.
Shifting over just a little bit to business.
Where's the person?
Oh, hello.
Way up
Okay.
top. The lights are bright.
I kind of blend in. Was it difficult to get financing and distribution?
Financing distribution?
Yes.
Well, the film was not distributed.
Oh, it wasn't.
No, not very little. It was in a lot of places in the first 2 or 3 years that it existed, but they were mostly festivals of new independent films, that sort of thing, and so that was the kind of distribution it got at that time. But financing the movie, is that what
yes.
you?
Yes,
okay.
exactly.
All right. Well, Jimmy Carter, who was president of the United States at the time, created this program that was called the Comprehensive something or other and Training Act, and it was a very rich act, and it allowed for people who qualified and who were doing some kind of a job to be financed. And the first part of it was a program that lasted for a whole year, and I applied for that, and I got it, which meant that I had a salary for an entire year, which was part of the time that we were making the movie, and part of where our money came from. And then I also applied for a very large grant from the CETA program, which financed many other things in the film, including paying people to work. And that is where the financing came for property.
Great,
But-
thanks.
It's a surprising funding source for an independent film to come from
And what
the
a
government
shame!
in that
What
way.
a shame that there isn't that kind of an act, more often, because that was a long time ago, and there's never been a similar piece of legislation since then.
The film screened at what would become the Sundance Film Festival.
Right, the
Tell-
first one. Yeah.
Tell us about that experience about bringing the film to that festival.
Oh, it was a
Utah.
lot of fun, that's
Yeah.
for sure. And also important, we met a lot of people. Eric and Michael Horowitz and I went to this, to that festival. And so we all met a lot of people who would later turn up in our lives and who were, it was great in that regard. And also the festival, which was Robert Redford's festival at the time, he brought a lot of people from Hollywood to the festival, and they were so accessible. I mean, it was not a big deal at the time. The first Sundance. It was very casual, and so they were very accessible. I remember having conversations with, and I've forgotten her name now, the famous editor Verna Fields, right? She was just there, available, and I came up to her and talked to her several times. I mean, it was really wonderful, and I've never had that kind of a festival experience since. I mean, I've had plenty of festival experiences, but not that casual, not that open, not that loose.
What a moment to be there at the very first and have it be like that. Set us up for the next film, for Paydirt, without giving it away.
Well, it's a very different kind of film, and many people have said that it doesn't look that it looks like two different people made the property and Paydirt, because it is not like property. It's a different style, and it's almost in a genre. That's what you say too.
Yeah, I won't
Right.
say which genre, but it feels like a genre film
Right.
to me.
Right, but it is my rural statement, because property was my urban statement, and so Paydirt, the next movie is the rural experience with a kind of I don't know what I'm not going to say anything more, but
Paul, do we take a quick break? Okay.
I forgot to say
Yes.
that Gus is here. Yeah, is Gus still
It's
here?
the whole crew
Yes, Gus is still
of
there.
property
Right,
is here.
stand up. Okay. Gus is here.
All right, we have time for a 10-minute break. Please come back for Paydirt. It's really spectacular. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you.
So wonderful to
Thank
have
you
you
all
with
very
us.
much.
Yeah, and thank you, Eric, for your comments too. Thank you.